No, that's upside down. Hello everybody, welcome back to Needle Workshop. My name is Emily, and today I'll be presenting a tutorial for our newest cosplay bundle, the Seifuku uniform, also known as a Japanese schoolgirl uniform. We'll have both the knife pleated skirt and Seifuku shirt available as single items, but also have them available together as a bundle. This tutorial will be focusing on the shirt only, but there is an older video on how to assemble the knife pleated skirt, which you can check out. The skirt included is about knee length, but there is a line that is situated a bit higher on the pattern where you can shorten the skirt to show off a little bit more legs. Also good to know is that all our patterns come in extra small to 4XL. As per usual, all our patterns come with super detailed written tutorials that includes tons of extra info such as a measurement guide, a printing guide, some material suggestions, and tons of pictures and graphics to help you through the tutorial. As always, I recommend making a mock-up before starting. No two bodies are the same, so making a mock-up allows you to tweak and adjust the pattern to make sure that the fit is just right for you. Also important to note is that the seam allowance for these patterns is always 1 cm wide unless specified otherwise. And without any further ado, let's get started. I'm first going to start with any pattern modification that is necessary. So in my case, I actually need to adjust the shape of my collar to match the character that I'm trying to make. Most characters have a square collar at the back, but exceptionally, the one I need is a more unique shape. Personally, it reminds me a little bit of clown collars. So actually, looking at it now, I think I meant more like a jester collar. Like it has these weird little like points. It's not so much a clown collar as much as it is like specifically like a jester collar. Using my original pattern, I traced it onto paper, made sure to mark my notch, and then went ahead and added length at the back. I used my shirt back piece to measure out the length that I wanted. Since I never removed the original seam allowance, there's no need to add it back in. If you happen to like this collar shape, we are most likely going to have it available as a separate listing on our website. We'll start by taking out our front and back shirt pieces. Start by overlocking your side and shoulder seams on both the front and back piece. Right side to right side, align the front and the back pieces and sew together at the side seams and shoulder seams. Iron your seam allowance, open. Turn the hem of your shirt in by 1 centimeter twice, iron flat and top stitch in place. Take out your front and back facing pieces. Make sure to fully interface both pieces. Align right side to right side at the shoulder seam and sew together. Iron the seam allowance, open. Overlock the outer edge. Moving on to the collar, make sure to overlock one of the two pieces. Using that same piece, mark out the placement of your ribbon or bias applique. More information on that later. I would suggest using a washable chalk crayon here and not a pencil like I did. Now we do have a suggested placement on our pattern, but that can be modified and adjusted to suit the design that you're trying to emulate. Just remember that whatever you do, you need to take the seam allowance into account. Once you're done marking everything, I suggest using a washable quilting tape and applying it where the bias tape will go. Where you have a more pronounced curve, cut the bias tape into smaller pieces to help position them. Here, I'm actually using a very stiff ribbon, which is very hard to position since it doesn't have any stretch at all. If you are new to sewing, I would highly recommend using a bias tape for this part. Bias tape stretches out very easily, making it much more accommodating to curves, and that's because fabric cut on the bias is stretchy. You can still attempt to use a ribbon, but it requires a lot of ironing to kind of force it into the shape you need. Once you get to your first corner placement, here's what I recommend. I like to move to my ironing board to do the few next steps. Start by positioning your trim into a nice pleat. Since you're on your ironing board, you should be able to pin through the board where there happens to be holes underneath. Place a pin at the tip of your fold to hold it in place. Readjust your fold to create a clean, straight line. Iron the fold into place. At this point, you could remove the ribbon and go sew that fold into your trim. If, like me, you want to speed up the process though, just leave it as is. You'll still need to cut off the excess trim from underneath the fold to get a clean finish. Using your quilting tape, continue placing your trim into place and secure it in place with pins. Rinse and repeat the corner steps as needed. When it comes to the placement of the trim at the front of the collar, make sure to pay extra attention. You want to make sure that they are properly aligned. Otherwise, it's gonna look a little bit odd once you're done with your piece. You'll need to sew the trim in place with a top stitch on both sides, 1 to 2 millimeters away from the edge. Right side to right side, align your other collar piece to the one with the trim and sew together along the outer edge. Cut off all excess seam allowance at the corners, and in my case, I needed to cut a little notch in the concave area. Turn your piece inside out and carefully push out the corners. Iron the edges of the piece flat. Secure the inner edges together with a top stitch 7 millimeters from the edge. Now we start the hardest part, so make sure to really focus here. Start by marking the seam allowance at the point of the neckline. This will help the placement of the collar. Align the collar at the center back of the neckline using the notches as a guide. Then align the collar at the shoulder using the notches and the seam as a guide. And then align the tip of the front of the collar to the tip of the marked seam allowance. Pin everything in place. The tip of the collar gets pretty tricky. That's actually the hard part. You want to make sure to sew them side by side, which will cause them to flip up due to the seam allowance of the collar. You want to make sure not to sew them overlapped. To achieve this, sewing 9 millimeters from the edge, you start by sewing one side into place, making your way around the collar, and when you get to the other side of the collar tip, you move the other tip out of the way and then keep sewing. Once the collar is sewn down, you can cut off the excess seam allowance that is flipping up. Next, mark the seam allowance at the tip of the inner edge of the facing piece on the wrong side of the fabric. Position the tip of the marked seam allowance right under the tip of the collar and pin in place. Align and pin in place the rest of the facing. Sew the facing into place 1 centimeter from the seam allowance. Cut notches into the concave tip and around the curve of the neckline. Make sure not to cut into the stitch. Turn the facing towards the inside and iron everything flat. Either secure the facing into place with a tack at the center back, at the shoulder seam, and at the side front, or top stitch all around the neckline about 2 to 3 millimeters from the edge. If you plan on adding a bow or a scarf at the front of your shirt, you can add a small tack at the center front. Moving on to the sleeves, we'll start with the cuffs. You'll need to start by interfacing your pieces. My fabric was really thick, so I only ended up interfacing half the piece. And that's because it's a white fabric. Generally, they can be see-through, so I wanted something a little thicker. Fold your piece in half along the longest length, wrong side to wrong side, and iron flat. Next, I'll be marking the position of my trim on the half of the cuff that's interfaced. I'm going to center my trim with my markings. Again, I'm using the quilting tape to help position my trim. Sew the trim into place with a top stitch on both sides, 1 to 2 millimeters from the edge. Make sure to sew while the cuff is unfolded. Fold your cuffs and align them along the shortest length. Make sure to properly align your trim and sew into place. Iron your seam allowance open and then fold back along the longest length. Take out your sleeve pieces. Add whatever patch or applique that you would want to have on the sleeve before proceeding to the next part. Overlock your side seams and then sew the side seam right side to right side 1 centimeter from the edge. Iron your seam allowance open. Gather the hem of the sleeves. For more info on this, please check out the video linked below. Right side to right side, insert the hem into the cuff. Align the seams of the cuff and shirt together, and then align the notches of the cuff and sleeve together while adjusting the gathers of the sleeve. Pin everything into place and sew together with a straight stitch first, followed by an overlock. Here's what the sleeves look like. Our pattern comes with 3 different types of sleeves. There is the long sleeve as shown here, and there are also 2 shorter sleeve models. You can pick and choose according to the design of your choice. Using the single notch on the sleeve to indicate the front, position your sleeves to the right and left side. Lightly gather the crown of the sleeve. There are notches on the pattern that indicate where to gather, and then using the seams and notches to align everything properly, pin the sleeve to the shirt before sewing with a straight stitch, followed by an overlock. Once I had both sleeves attached, I was essentially done with this shirt. This particular shirt didn't have the little front triangular piece, so I made a separate shirt to demonstrate how to attach that section. Let me show you how it's done. Take out your triangular pieces and interface the piece with the notch on the right, looking at it right side up. If there is any trim you would like to apply, you'll need to apply them to that piece. Right side to right side, sew the two pieces together along the side with no notch and at the top. Cut the excess seam allowance at the corner and turn inside out. Overlock the side with the notch. Use your pattern piece to mark the position of your snaps. Apply the male snaps to the triangular piece. When positioning the triangular piece to the inside of the shirt, you'll need to align the notch to the tip of your neckline. Pin and place the overlocked side under the collar and top stitch into place. For the snaps on the other side, you can refer yourself to the pattern for the placement or mark where your snaps align. Once your snaps are sewn in, you are done. So I think that covers everything for today's video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos. Your support is always welcome and really helps with the growth of the channel. And as always, you can follow us on any of our social media accounts and tag us if you would like for us to see your projects and share them with everyone else. So I think that wraps up today's video. As always, good luck with your projects, guys. Bye bye.